Hello, welcome back. This is Negotiating with Jesus. I'm Tom. I should look at the little camera thingy there. Where's it at? Right there it is. Man, if I ever get one of those iPhones with 3 cameras, boy, that would be amazing. I'll be able to find it. But I'm going to tell you a joke quick. I did look up jokes, and I want to discuss jokes because A, they're funny. Maybe you'll come back and hear another joke. And B, they're interesting. They say something about the world. So, and 3, did I say A, B, C, or 3, whichever one I'm on? They say something interesting about the world. They also can help you make connections. So to me, the idea that we're going to just tell a joke and then just think about it. Think about what it means and just practice. You need to practice telling a joke. You want to be able to tell a joke. Now, oftentimes I'll just look at the joke and I won't be practiced at all. But I get the idea. I get the idea of what we're looking for. So the other day I'm sitting at the barber shop and I'm getting my hair cut, and it's, I have a great barber. They do a great job. And I'm sitting there and the barber sees a kid walk in and he whispers to me, "Watch this. This is the dumbest kid I've ever met." So the kid walks in, and I'm watching this encounter, and the barber says, hey, Johnny, come over here. And the barber holds out in his hand a dollar bill and 2 quarters. And he says, "Johnny, which one do you want?" And Johnny takes the 2 quarters and leaves. And he says, so Johnny left, and the barber says to me, "See, this kid is so dumb. He never learns the lesson." And I'm like, yeah, makes sense. He's young enough, maybe he doesn't understand that the shiny coins aren't worth as much as the money. So I left the barber shop and I looked this fabulous. It was amazing, and I saw Johnny out in the store, and he was buying a couple lollipops, and they were Tootsie Roll Pops, which are, in my opinion, the best. The best lollipops. Tootsie Roll Pop, that nice 1, 2, 3 licks, and then into that delicious Tootsie Roll center. So I said to Johnny, "Hey, what is with you? Why did you take the quarters instead of the dollar bill?" And Johnny goes, "Well, the day I take the dollar bill, the game is over." I'm like, oh, that is pretty interesting, Johnny. So the barber may be the dumbest kid you ever met. Johnny plays the game over and over, and the barber keeps giving him 50 cents. So, Johnny accumulates. And one of the interesting things about this, it says something true. It says that there's always a tragedy, and all jokes have to play off somebody who's foolish or dumb or hurt or whatever. So all jokes play into the idea that life has tragic aspect to it. And somehow we need to shrug it off or laugh or just get on with our lives. So, calling someone dumb, he's the dumbest kid I ever met. Turns out that the barber was the dumb one, but you laugh now at somebody who's not as smart as you, because when you hear Johnny's explanation, you're like, oh, I'm in on the secret. And Johnny's going to keep playing the game over and over and try and milk as much money from the barber as he can. So the truth of the matter is that jokes must pick on somebody, and they tell you something about the world. That there are, I don't remember where I was going with that. Anyway, so we're going to get to the gospel. To me, the idea that the gospel is like telling a story. It's like telling a joke or a little story. And there's tragedy in it, and you have to get to one thing, which is the tragic aspect of life, that death is happening, or suffering, or struggle. And we're stuck not being able to work our way out of it. And the joke, the comedy, in acting, there is either tragedy or comedy. You know, that great smiley face and that crying face of the theater. Well, the joke is that in this tragic aspect, it turns into a comedy. If there's a rescue, if there's something that can relieve us from this pain, and often it's somebody else's pain, but it always comes down to us. So the reason the gospel turns tragedy into comedy is because there's a rescuer, and there is this idea of a redemption, salvation. That when we know the joke, when we know the story, we're not the one who's in the tragedy. We become rescued. We become the joke teller. That we now know the secret. So all of a sudden, you become the one who can share something funny and bring someone else into your understanding. A joke brings someone into your understanding. You're sharing something that they can share with somebody else. That's the gospel. You're sharing something that's a little story that all of a sudden turns into a rescue, and now you know the secret that this tragedy is actually a comedy. That's what Jesus flips this whole narrative, and he makes this rescue. So we're going to read in Mark chapter 5, verse 21. We're going to read one of my favorite stories. And I like Mark. If you're going to read one of the Gospels, Mark is a great gospel to get through. And just ponder it. Read it out loud. Read it several times. And try and think, what is this story talking about? Why is this interesting? How is it that this story is 2,000 years old and people still are fascinated by it? It's not because it's lame or shallow or uninteresting. There's got to be something here. There are people smarter than you and me that think this story is important. Of course, there are people smarter than you and me that don't know the joke. They don't know the gospel, the secret that once you understand, you come into this place where you can smile. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. So Jairus sees Jesus. He's going to beg him. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying." And that is tragedy. That's the whole thing. This is the whole game. And we all know it. This isn't the secret. Everyone who has a little daughter, she's dying. And whether she has cancer in Hershey Med or whether she's lived a long life, your daughter, it's the Genesis 3 story. Eat of the fruit and you will surely die. Pleaded with him earnestly, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman who was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had some problem that she bled and couldn't stop this continuous bleeding. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors who had spent all they had, and she had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch him, just touch his clothes, I will be healed. He has some kind of power. Everyone knows this guy has power. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. How does that not make you leap for joy? That's the turning of tragedy into comedy. All of a sudden, she's entered a place where now there is relief, now there is joy. That's the whole point of a joke. That's the whole point of rescue. That's the whole point of revelation. All of a sudden, now you understand. If you can find that kind of power and touch it, Jesus had it. She understood it. She changed her tragic life into a comedy. At once, Jesus realized the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples, of course, knowing better than Jesus, we always can advise the teacher. You see the people crowding against you, and yet you can ask, "Who touched me?" Duh, Jesus. oh, Jesus. I love the disciples. I love them. They're like, Jesus, let me explain life to you. And they probably nudge each other and say, oh, Jesus, he just doesn't understand like we do. That is absolutely how all people are. And people will say to me how dumb I am. Oh, Tom, he doesn't understand. Yeah, of course I don't. I'm like you. I'm pretty dense. You can ask who touched me? Oh, Jesus. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, Jesus said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Her faith had healed her. What is it to have faith? Is it this stupid, naive belief in something that is not true? Well, this woman knew for sure that Jesus had power. She said, I'm going to go touch him. I'm going to act on that knowledge. And if there's any way that this power, this overwhelming power, can fall on me, the only way that's possible in anybody's mind is you get up next to Jesus. At the very least, I'm going to touch him. If that doesn't work, I'll talk to him. She's doing what is perfectly reasonable. There's no more reasonable thing in the world. And he says, daughter, your faith has healed you. She believed something that was true. And it was reasonable to believe it. And she had no other options. Guess what? It's reasonable for us to believe it, and we have no other good options. List all your good options down below in the comments if you have a lot of great options. And I love the atheist debate and all the great options that people have. It's so interesting to be in this tragedy and get a glimpse of something better. And it appears by all evidence, all studying, it appears to be true. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? That tragedy, I have seen people lose children. It is the greatest tragedy. There are tragedies all around us. I could weep. I have a daughter. I have 2 daughters. I can't even imagine the profound suffering of losing a child. One of my daughters said to me one time, and we've taught her about Jesus. We said, you know what? Life is going to be taken from you. There's not any real long-term hope in life. You get to get a little bit of joy, but the only real hope is hope in a greater power, someone who can heal, and that's Jesus. We told her about Jesus, and she said, I want to meet Jesus. And she had the image of going to Jesus in heaven. She said, boy, I want to meet Jesus. And I said, that is wonderful. I so want that to be your hope, but I don't want you to meet him right now. And it's a selfish thing for me. I don't want to lose you. That is the parent-child connection. Lord Jesus, please don't take her now. Whatever life is, I know that it is fleeting and it can be gone in an instant. Lord, please give me more time right now with my child. So it was the sweetest words that were they laid the tragedy out for me. And I know the tragedy is as real as it can be. Why bother the teacher anymore? Your daughter is dead. Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. And that believe connecting directly with faith. So someone powerful says that. We have all kinds of people who are as weak as you and me, as weak as anyone who's ever lived, that will say, don't bother the teacher. There's no hope. She's dead. There are all kinds of people that can tell you that amazing truth. There's no hope. This is the atheist argument. Ultimately, there's nothing you can do. Well, that's great. We all have that great power to do nothing. Uh, Jesus says, though, Jesus, someone who has power, says, don't be afraid and believe. It's a trust me statement. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John. That was the inner circle. James and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion and people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. What are you going to do it to Jesus? Mock him? Torture him and kill him. It's what we do. That's our part of the Jesus interaction. That's your part. That's my part. Jesus is laughed at, mocked, ridiculed, tortured, killed. That is the human response to Jesus. They laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. He goes to the little girl, takes her hand and says, little girl, I say to you, get up. It's Jesus talking. And what I say goes. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. My oldest daughter, will be 12 this year, just a couple months. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So there's the end of chapter 5 of Mark. Read this story out loud. Consider what it means. And then consider telling jokes and understanding how the gospel is like this sweet story that reveals something and turns tragedy into comedy. And now you're on the inside. When you tell the joke, you're someone who's on the inside. When you tell the gospel, when you understand what it is, it's a sweet transfer of truth, bringing someone into your understanding. The gospel is the sweetest comedy, the sweetest little story that can be delivered. Learn to say a joke, learn to say the gospel, learn to say Jesus' name out loud. That is your very act of worship. I'll talk to you again. Remember to like and subscribe. Click down below, hit the notification bell. I will try and give a regular joke and a little discussion of jokes. I'm kind of obsessed with this right now, the idea of what it is to tell a joke and use that to bring some kind of little joy into people's lives. So long.